Most people treat the job market signal as the unemployment rate, a layoff headline, or the number of openings on LinkedIn. That is lagging data. The leading signal shows up earlier, inside how companies describe the job itself. Here is the signal most professionals miss. When a role stops being described as ownership and starts being described as throughput, the market has already turned against you. Not because you are about to be fired tomorrow, but because your leverage has shifted from scarce judgment to abundant capacity. For decades, white-collar security came from a simple deal. You owned a domain. You were responsible for an outcome. That ownership created institutional dependency. Dependency created protection. Now enterprises are rebuilding the workforce around a different unit. Measured tasks that can be routed, priced, and recombined. The dominant mechanism is work packetization under budget pressure. Finance does not cut people. Finance cuts cost signatures. When leaders are told to protect margin, they search for spend that can be made variable. Variable spend is easier to pause than fixed compensation. Stable roles get decomposed into work packets. Those packets can be routed to contractors, offshore teams, specialized vendors, or internal gig benches. AI lowers routing cost. It does not need to be perfect. It only needs to stay inside acceptable error tolerance. You can see this shift in job descriptions. Look for phrases like manage intake, triage requests, drive operational cadence, ensure SLA compliance, coordinate stakeholders. Those are pipeline verbs. They describe a human adapter sitting between systems, turning ambiguity into tickets and tickets into status. That adapter layer exists only as long as translation is expensive. Then look for the psychological tell. Comfortable with ambiguity, strong execution, high ownership without formal authority. That is liability without authority. You carry outcome pressure, but you do not control capital, headcount, or final approval. Stress increases because accountability expands while decision rights do not. Throughput roles absorb risk without holding power, and roles that absorb risk without authority are easier to price as capacity. Meanwhile, the roles that get quietly protected are written differently. Allocate capital, own P&L, price risk, design operating model, negotiate vendor terms, approve exceptions. These are decision verbs. They are harder to outsource, harder to fully instrument, and politically expensive to remove. Most professionals misread the market because they count postings instead of parsing language. A company can post 500 jobs and still be de-risking its workforce if those jobs are pipeline seats. It can post fewer jobs and still be investing aggressively if those hires sit near budget authority. The hiring process sends signals too. When time to offer stretches, assessments multiply, and panels expand, it is not always about quality. Often it is about preserving option value. The organization wants candidate inventory without committing to fixed cost. Slow hiring is a budget hedge. You might be feeling this already. More reporting, more coordination, fewer decisions. If that tension feels familiar, you are not imagining it. You are being re-indexed from owner to operator. Here is the exposure map framed as a simple risk quadrant. On one axis, decision authority versus task execution. On the other, budget proximity versus process distance. High risk sits in the quadrant with low authority and high process density. Coordination-heavy program roles, reporting and dashboard functions, enablement operations, process layers in customer success, and any role measured primarily by ticket closure or meeting volume. Lower risk sits where authority intersects budgets. Pricing committees, risk sign-off, capacity planning, compensation design, governance, and exception approval. The common misread is this: the market is soft, so I just need more skills. Upskilling matters, but pricing matters more. If your value is priced as hours and throughput, you will compete against hours and throughput. If your value is priced as judgment that changes a budget line, you will be protected longer and paid accordingly. So what do? First, audit your calendar. What verbs dominate your week? Are you deciding, or are you keeping flow moving? If you are mostly a translator, coordinator, or status generator, treat it as an early warning. Second, move one rung closer to a budget owner. Attach yourself to decisions: vendor selection, risk approval, capacity planning, compensation logic, governance, exception handling. Become the person who can defend a trade-off in dollars. Third, build a proof artifact that travels. Not a certificate, a decision memo, a pricing model, a vendor benchmark, a policy draft, something that compresses ambiguity into a recommendation. A decision artifact is proof you can weigh consequences, not just follow instructions. Judgment is the last mile of work that cannot be automated because it requires skin in the game. When you document the logic behind a difficult choice, you are creating a record of value that exists outside of a project management tool. Do not just say you managed a project. Show the ROI model you built that convinced a CFO to shut down a failing initiative. That is a decision artifact. In an AI-saturated enterprise, artifacts of judgment command a premium, while artifacts of activity are ignored. Fourth, watch internal shifts. If your company launches an internal talent marketplace, expands contractor budgets, centralizes operations excellence, or instruments cycle time and rework on knowledge tasks, it is preparing those tasks to be priced against substitutes. This isn't just about efficiency, it's about modularity. When leadership views your output as a unit of work rather than a domain of responsibility, they have successfully de-risked the business by making you optional. You must resist being commoditized into a spreadsheet cell. When work becomes modular, the person performing it becomes replaceable by anyone with the same credentials and a lower price point. This claim is falsifiable. If work packetization is not the leading signal, companies should be increasing domain ownership roles, shortening hiring loops, and converting contractors into permanent hires as conditions stabilize. If instead you see more contract to hire, more offshore capacity, and more roles written like assembly lines, the direction is visible. This is not a reason to panic. It is a reason to read the labor market like finance reads a balance sheet. The signal is not how many jobs are posted. It is whether the job is written as a decision seat or a throughput valve. Survival requires moving from the pipeline to the central control room. The goal isn't just to stay employed, it is to stay expensive. In a world of infinite capacity, the only thing that retains its price floor is the rare ability to say no to a bad investment or yes to a risky opportunity with valid evidence. Catch that shift early, and you reposition before the pricing model moves against you. Miss it, and one day you will realize you were never competing against a person. You were competing against a pricing model.